Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Erynn and Carl here. We have a request for Old Christmas Morning. The first version of this tune I learned comes from French Carpenter, West Virginia, Clay County. It's a really crooked tune. It's not easy to back up. It's usually part of the solo fiddle tradition, but we'll try just for fun, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of those older generation West Virginia fiddlers, Melvin Wine and Lester McCumbers and others, would talk about old Christmas around January 6th. So it goes back, this tune, quite a ways. Here we go. Cross A. Bit of old Christmas morning.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Carl.
Sure.
You hung
Beautiful.
on pretty good.
That's right. Yeah, it's good. Very nice.
So, with a tune like this, often in that kind of hanging spot, which, you know, Lindy McCumbers, a wonderful ballad singer, she once referred to fiddlers nowadays as cutting the dwells out of the music. So there was often these moments in older style tunes where people kind of hang on a spot. And I always thought that this was connected to the ballad traditions, because a lot of those fiddlers that played mostly solo were around a lot of unaccompanied singers, and some of the fiddlers backed up the singers. There's examples of this with Daisy Hammonds and Maggie Hammonds, and I'm sure others. So those little moments were not tied down to a certain amount of beats. A fiddler might play them differently each time, and it's fun to play this solo so that you can. But we chose a way that you could do it so you could write it out in case you wanted to try and play this with someone else. I have mixed feelings. It's good both ways. I really love it solo. I love the freedom of being able to kind of change it a little bit. But here we go. So key of A, and I'm in cross A, E, A. Okay, and it's kind of nice that there's been, you know, some clearer recordings than when I first learned this like 30 some years ago. You could barely hear what French was doing. Some of those recordings that had passed around were so full of static, but now you can hear a little bit better. So it was really interesting to go back in and listen again. So that's kind of the main melody of the first part as I hear it. And he does slight variations on this part. But let's start with that. So starting on your G natural, this is a modal tune. So we're going to have G naturals in there instead of G sharp. Let's try that. I'm choosing to slur here, slur here, and I can hear French throwing in a bit of a slur in here. He doesn't always do it the same way, but I'm going to put a 3-note slur there. And then a little bit of an accent on that high A note. Okay, and you could add the open A drone to that last note. And actually quite often he's droning another string. And I love the sound of that. I love the little dissonances that you'll get, like the G natural against the open A. Okay, so it's really beautiful. I think that today we often clean up those dissonances. I call it sanitizing it. And we want those fleeting, crunchy notes in there. And it also happens when the guitar backs this up. So you'll sometimes have clashing notes, and that's really common. Even on a tune like June Apple in Round Peak is kind of famous for the banjo and the fiddle having clashing notes together, and it's sounding bluesy and cool. Okay, so let's move on. So we have, I'm going to take the drones off for a second. And French likes some really neat little left-hand ornaments. So let's put a little grace note in there. And he swings his eighth notes quite a bit. This last little bit, you're going to put your second finger down because your D string's tuned up to an E. See how I leave my first finger and second finger down at the same time? And then I put the third down, and I hit the low string, the low drone, and that third together, so the lower two strings together. And it makes a nice little chord in the middle. Hear that? And then drone. So that's that little spot there, and I think it's very beautiful. It's not hard to play once you just leave your fingers down, and you'll kind of form that chord naturally. So we had, let's get the rest of it. Grace note. Two. Now, sometimes he'll go, sometimes he trails an extra note in there. That's really nice if you get the F sharp in there. Now, there's been a controversy in this little spot where he's doing the swung eighth notes. And it's really easy to hear it now on these clear recordings. It's very swung, and he's sometimes a little scratchy, but many people have played what some call bowed triplets. It's not truly a triplet. It's like 3 strokes, so people tend to call it a triplet, but it's really 2 short with a longer note, right? Traditionally, a lot of people have thrown that in there. And when I listened to that recording back in the day, I put a little bowed triplet in there. And I've heard other people do it too, Dan Gellert and others. As a matter of fact, there was a internet troll. I've only been attacked by one internet troll, but they complained I wasn't putting bowed triplets in this piece. It was really funny. Anyways, the funny thing was I was, in fact. This is the piece I played in the finals at Clifftop, the one year I miraculously won. And you can see that online. And I'm playing bowed triplets in that, but they're kind of slow. I used to play this tune like this. So it's there, a little slower than some people make it really crunchy. Sometimes with triplets, they call it, you get the dirt in there, you kind of push the bow down, you get a bit of a scratch. Anyways, you'll sometimes hear people do that, and it's a nice variation in there. But listening to French again, I'm like, I could not hear, I listened to two different versions. I could not hear a triplet anymore now that it was so clear. So it's a little easier, but I'm kind of fond of that triplet. So anyways, do whatever you feel like there. And so you do that phrase twice. Let's try it again. 1, 2, ready, go. The hardest part of the whole tune, the hanging section, or the dwell as Lindy McCumbers would have called it. And it just kind of drifts off into space. So it starts with, and I do a bow rock, and you hold it for probably an indeterminate amount of time there. Up, up, down, bow rock. But right at the bow rock I start counting. It's the start of a new, the bow rock happens just before the count. So let's hold it for 6 beats. Okay, so it'll go bow 1, 2, 3. So bow rock. Instead of saying bow rock, on rock, that's the beginning of the downbeat. So I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it kind of falls out of this hanging moment. This is very old. Fiddlers don't play like this anymore. And it's so beautiful. So that's how we're going to fall out of the hanging dwell. Okay, so let's try that. There's a grace note. And he sometimes goes. Another time he goes. Which is what I'm going to do. A grace note, or like a hammer-on. You can call it different things. And then there's this new melody that's, kind of the B part melody as I hear it. And I do it I have 3 phrases to my B part. So basically that happens 3 times, and he does all kinds of subtle variations in this melody. Rock. He holds that a little longer at the end, so it's a little longer last bar. And then you're back to the beginning. So that's kind of the form. So you got an A part 2 times through an A part melody. Then you have this weird kind of transitional bridge. Bum, ba, da, dee, doo, dee, where it holds and it falls da da dee da ya da da into the B part. Da da dee da dum dee. And all of a sudden you can tap your foot again. You can't tap your foot in the middle of that irregular length part where it's hanging. It's best if people don't tap their foot there. But once you get back into the B part, you can sort of tap your foot again, and it feels more regular. Told you this was a wild piece. It's one of the crookedest tunes I know. Okay, so let's see. Let's try the hanging part again. Okay, what I'll call it the bridge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and that's going to lead us like a bridge into that next part. Let's try that again. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you're back into your next part. And some musicians, like when I played with the Haint String Band, they could follow me anywhere. With those wonderful accompanists, I probably could have done that hanging section. I know I could have. Any length of beats. And they would be hanging on, and as soon as I came out of it, they'd be right with me. So that's kind of fun when you... But this is not a great jam tune, obviously, but you could play it with a intuitive or sensitive backup person if you wanted to. Okay, so let's try the last part of it. Okay, I do think of this as kind of like just a 2-part tune with a bridge. We're going to learn 3 variations that French did on this, and they're very subtle. Okay, so first one, and I put my 3rd finger down on that 2nd lowest string and hit the low drones. Up, up, open, open. Okay, so that's one way that he does it. Open, open. And every time you're doing that, you're probably doing up-bow slur. Okay, so that's once through our B part. Let's try that again. Up-bow slur. Open, open. Up-bow slur. Swung 8th. 2, 3. Up-bow slur. Okay, here's the second way he played that melody. That's the same, and he goes for this bluesier note. I love that. So I went for my 1st finger, the B note. 2, open. Slightly different rhythm there, right? Slur. Down, 8th note, slur. Okay? And then 3rd time, here's another variation. And do you need to remember all these variations in a particular order? Not at all. Could you make up your own variation on this melody? Absolutely. And the last time, down, I do a bow rock and hold for 2 more beats. Down. And then you're back to the melody. Okay, so I'm going to play through the way I wrote this out for you with those 3 variations on the B part, and you could do the same line each time if you wanted to. triplet for fun. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6. Come up with your own variation. One more time. Yeah, and memorize it, obviously, and just try to emote. It's such a beautiful old melody. It's one of my favorites, and it's hard. It's wonderful to play with other people, but it's hard to beat the beauty of this, playing this on a winter day all by yourself, and just feeling it, and letting the variations happen, and your instrument just come alive and speak with all those beautiful drones. Enjoy that old Christmas morning.